When purchasing a new caulking gun, there's a couple of key things that you need to know. One is the ratio and how that affects your caulking, and two is the type of caulking gun that you're purchasing. Let's go. You're in the market for a new gun, but you need to understand what you're buying. Let's run through the different styles of caulking guns. So here we have what's called a ratchet caulking gun or a glazing gun. Now, this is a low ratio. This particular one's a 6:1 ratio, which that ratio means with each pull of the trigger moves that shaft forward a lot further than your high ratios. Now, the difference between a ratcheting gun or what you call a smooth shaft gun is it's got little teeth on that shaft. With each squeeze of the trigger, the mechanism grabs those teeth and pushes it forward. But when you let go of each squeeze, it releases the pressure off that shaft, which means it stops pushing that material out of the silicone tube. Because of that release, that minimizes the little ripples that you get in that bead. That's why you can get a really nice clean bead straight off the gun with a ratchet gun. The downside is they are lower geared, which means they're quite hard to pull if you're running a small nozzle, but most glaze beads are quite big. Now, moving on to probably a more common ratio with a smooth shaft gun. So with a smooth shaft gun, they have a friction plate, a smooth shaft, and with each pull of the trigger, that friction plate grabs that shaft and pushes the shaft forward. With this ratio, this is a 12:1 ratio. This is a different brand. They call it a Model 150. This is a newborn gun, but if you look up on their spec sheet, it will tell you the ratio of each model number. This is also a 12:1 ratio. These are your more common ratios that you'll find at your general hardware stores or your caulking supply stores. Next, you have an 18:1 ratio. This is made for either beginners or also harder materials. So the harder the material, the higher the ratio you need to push that material comfortably. So with an 18:1 ratio, this is a really good starting point if you're starting out caulking, because it's easier to squeeze. It slows down your workflow because with each squeeze, it doesn't push out as much material, which means you can build up your confidence and your skill levels before moving up to 12:1 ratio, 10:1 ratio, because that's pushes out a lot more material with each squeeze, which then means that your workflow is a lot quicker. Now, we have a 26:1 ratio, really handy for your two-part epoxies, your non-pick, your fire rate, solid materials, especially if you're running a small nozzle and there's a lot of pressure built up in that cartridge, and it takes a lot of pressure to push out that material. Now, 26:1 ratio, I probably wouldn't use for everyday caulking with silicone, just because you'll be pumping it a lot throughout the day, and it only moves that shaft a little bit with each pump, which means you can in turn fatigue your hands and wrists just by the amount of times that you're pulling that trigger. Okay, so moving up to this end of the table, you've got what you call a sausage gun. Now, these are for your 600mm sausages. These are generally high geared guns just because it's moving a lot more material and requires a lot more pressure to push that material out. This is a 12:1 ratio, and this one's an 18:1 ratio, and then it goes up to a 26:1 ratio. Now, I still run a 12:1 ratio, generally because in Australia, we're in a warmer climate. That poly generally is softer in a warmer climate and is a lot easier to move. Also with poly, I generally run a bigger nozzle. So this ratio is good for, say, a 10mm nozzle and up. Whereas if you're running a smaller nozzle to do finer poly work, I'd recommend an 18:1 ratio or a 26:1 ratio, just because it will be a lot easier on your hands to push that material out. Now, what I wanted to do to represent how the different ratios work is I'll use these three guns because they're all the same brand, they're all brand new. So what I'll do, I want to pull all the all the shafts to the backstop and then cycle each gun 10 times. Then we'll measure how far the shaft has moved into that cartridge, and that will represent how the ratios work. Now, we'll do this in millimeters. If you're in a different country and you've got a different measuring system, you'll just have to do the conversion, but this will still give you a representation on how the ratios work. So they're all pulled back. All right, we'll start with a 12:1 ratio. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then the 18:1 ratio. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 26:1 ratio. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the 12:1 is 104 millimeters. 18:1 is 65 millimeters. And the 26:1 is 57 millimeters. So you can see with those two examples, same amount of trigger pulls, very different movement, different end result, and a different amount of material getting squeezed out with each pull. A quick recap on gear ratios. The lower the number, the harder it is to pull the trigger, the further it moves the shaft. The higher the ratio, the easier it is to pull that trigger, the less it moves that shaft. Now, if you've learned something new today and want to learn more, hit that subscribe button, leave me a comment, let me know what ratio you use and why, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.